All right. Well, welcome everybody to another Bay Area Trails Confidential. It's our 25th show since the start of the pandemic. I'm Rodney Paul. I'm your host, and I am joined by Marie Sales. How are you doing tonight, Marie?
Doing really well.
And we've got a couple of really great guests. Peter Kageyama connecting to us from Florida. How are you tonight, Peter?
Doing great, Rodney. Thanks for having me.
And Anita Shinall connecting all the way from San Francisco, I think. Is that right, Anita?
That is correct. Thank you for having us.
So cool. We got a great show. I do want to first mention we were hosted by San Francisco City Guides, who've been doing tours of San Francisco for 40 plus years and includes a tour that starts at the Park Branch San Francisco Public Library. We'll be talking about that. We do want to do a land acknowledgement, and the places that we talk about are all originally Native American land, including the Ramaytush Ohlone Indians in the San Francisco Peninsula, and we want to respect their ancestors and the many people from different tribes who live in the Bay Area today. I do want to share the results of the poll with you guys. So this is our agenda, but let's take a look at. This is great. We got people connecting to us from all over. I'm sharing that with you guys. So very good distribution of people around the Bay Area. 100% of you have library cards. That just warms my heart to see that. How about you, Anita? You gotta like that. And a bunch of you have multiple library cards. Go ahead, Anita.
Everyone should have a library card. I'm thrilled that you all do.
Everybody should have a library card. I totally agree. And some of you have multiple library cards. We're going to find out if that's kosher or not a little later on. And then I've asked you about some places. Hunters Point, Vesuvio Cafe, the Rust Building, Yosemite Slough all figure in a detective novel that Peter has written, set in San Francisco. We'll be talking about that in a couple minutes. And great to see so many of you have been to various library branches. And we hope that we encourage you to visit more as a result of this show. That's kind of always my goal, is to get you guys to get out and see more stuff in the area. We'll do a couple of quick updates. And then we're going to talk about Peter's new novel, Hunters Point. Then we're going to be talking about my trips to many different libraries. I went to 25 different libraries in the past 2 weeks to do research for this. And we're going to have a contest. And actually, I didn't clear this with you, Marie. I think the contest is going to be a quiz. And someone's going to give us an answer to the quiz in chat. And they're going to be the winner of either the Bay Area Ridge Trail Guide or the Bay Trail map cards. Is that okay, Marie? All right. We like giving away that stuff. Usually I do this thing, Bay Trail Cred or Bay Ridge Trail Cred, where I've been on the Bay Trail or the Ridge Trail, but this time I'm not doing that. I'm showing you all my library cards. So I've got 19 different library cards around the Bay Area. There's actually one Bay Area library system I have yet to get, and it's Santa Clara County. Don't have their library card yet. I do have Los Angeles. And so we'll be talking about that when we get to the library section, but a little showing off there. I thought for trail updates, we'd do something a little different. We'd talk about something that many of us are very enthusiastic about. I should have asked how many people had been to the new subway that just opened up. So Marie, you've been there. How about you, Anita?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Have you been to the new subway?
I haven't, not yet. I can't wait.
It's an excellent way to get to the Chinatown branch of the San Francisco Public Library. It's really beautiful.
Try it next time I work there.
And this artwork I just saw was called Lucy in the Sky. So that's kind of got a Park Branch connection, I would say, right?
Definitely.
And then here's another really cool artwork. It's like cut out metal, and it kind of tells the story of Chinese immigrants coming to America. So that is not to be missed. Peter, when you're back in the Bay Area, you're definitely going to want to check that out.
And it's big.
But I did a little traveling myself, and I got to see the brand new Moynihan train station in New York City, which is such an improvement over Penn Station, the rabbit warren of Penn Station. That is such a sad place. This is a wonderful place to come on an Amtrak train. So just can't recommend that highly enough. I love new stuff. But let's, I did one other thing I just want to mention. We had Gary Kamiya a couple of months ago. I saw Gary Kamiya's band play. It was in my neighborhood. I had no idea. And I was looking at the list of bands coming to my local farmers market. And there was Gary. Here he is right here. He's the lead guitarist for a group called the Deadliners. And they've got a website, so check that out. I'll probably put it on the show notes. And he's a very good lead guitarist. He's a man of many talents, writer, tour guide, lead guitarist. Gotta love the guy. But let's talk about this novel of yours, Peter, Hunter's Point. And it's set here in San Francisco. So like, how did that come about? Like you live in Florida.
Yeah, a little bit of long distance there. Well, my father was born in San Francisco. So I have this familial connection there. And it was one of the cities that, San Francisco has always fascinated me. I first came there, I think, in 1981. My dad brought me there because I grew up in Ohio there. And it was a place that always sort of resonated with me. And he after he retired back out to the Bay Area. He was in Berkeley. So I used to go out there, once or twice a year for about a decade or so to visit him. And yes, so San Francisco was the natural starting point. And because I was setting it with a Japanese American protagonist, kind of made sense that it kind of had to be in San Francisco.
Yeah, it's interesting, because you wrote this during the pandemic. I want to show, we'll scroll through some of the drawings, these beautiful drawings in the book that were done by your wife, Lisa Wanamaker.
Yes, very proud of her. She is an architect, but she's one of those sort of classic architects who can draw. So, in order to show some of the things I was describing, picture's worth 1,000 words, and some folks may recognize that. There's Fort Point there, and that's actually a scene right out of the opening chapter of the book. And some people may actually recognize that from something else as well. But yeah, it was important that San Francisco be part of the story, to be authentic and to allow people to see sort of the city as it looked. The story set in essentially 1958. So this would be the Rust Building there. At the time, it was the tallest building in San Francisco. And I understand Rodney actually worked there at one point.
I did, but I was not a detective. I was a legal assistant. So not quite as glamorous. I see 4 of the people who completed the survey had been in the Rust Building.
Okay.
And you got to go there, Peter, right? When you were
in fact, I got to go there as part of a San Francisco City Guides tour. When I was researching this book, Lisa and I came to San Francisco last March, and San Francisco City Guides was incredibly important in helping me sort of make this book real. In fact, I got to tell you, folks, that Rodney was one of the main tour guides. He showed me around Hunter's Point, and that was incredibly important to my work. So Rodney's a big part of this story. And this is actually this was a fictional place in Hunter's Point in Bayview Heights. This is right there on what's called the Yosemite Slough. This would have been a shipbuilder and his family. They are essentially the clients in the story. And sort of how they become part of what's going on there is central to the mystery, I guess, as it were.
Yeah, the Yosemite Slough is such a wonderful place, and it's going to be a new park. You and Lisa and I and my wife, we went there and saw it. It hasn't officially opened up yet, but we did find a very good food truck for empanadas.
Yes.
But there's a lot of historic figures in this book, and you were alluding to this first opening scene. This is from a very famous film set in San Francisco, maybe the greatest San Francisco film.
Directly from Vertigo. Vertigo was filmed in San Francisco in the summer of 1957 there. And I opened the story essentially sort of on the set of Vertigo. And some of you may recognize this particular shot there of Kim Novak slowly throwing flowers into the bay. And you kind of, if you've seen the movie, you kind of know the context and what happens within that there. So obviously, you know, Vertigo is a little bit part of the story, and Jimmy Stewart is actually an important character in the story as well. So I love the ability to sort of integrate the things that really happened in San Francisco with some of the fictional things that I was writing about. And yes, Vertigo did make its premiere in San Francisco in May of 1958. There at what was then the Stage Door Theater, and is now actually an event venue there in the city. But yeah, the Stage Door was the world premiere of Vertigo.
So what were the challenges of like writing a book set in a place that, you know, you were writing this when you really weren't able to visit? How did you research our city?
Thank God for Google and Wikipedia. Sometimes for me, it was getting the sense of like, if I was writing about a particular street there, of course, I did write about Ann's 440, which is actually a seminal club in the history of San Francisco. It was actually originally called Mona's 440. It was actually bought by another couple, but it was actually, they say it was the first lesbian bar in San Francisco on the West Coast. There. So when I was writing about that particular thing, you're obviously looking for historic photos, but then sometimes going simply to Google Street View and looking at what does the buildings feel like? Because that's one of the great things about your city there, is that it hasn't changed significantly in a lot of ways. A lot of the building, a lot of the DNA, a lot of the architecture is still there, and you get a true sense of scale and what it might be like to, have walked those streets, 60 years ago.
Yeah, that is kind of cool that you do have a pretty good sense of what the cityscape was like then. In some places it's changed quite a bit, but in a lot of places it hasn't.
Yeah, this is the hero's home on Post. There, a classic Victorian.
Yeah, and tell us about, so the hero of your story is a detective named Katz.
Yes.
And you describe him as someone who'd rather be would find himself more comfortable in a local library than a seedy bar.
Yes.
So tell us more about who is Katz.
Yeah, Katsuhiro Takamoto. Katz is a veteran. He served in the 442nd in World War II, but he was also interned along with his family during World War II, and he volunteers out of the internment camp and becomes part of that storied unit that served over in Europe, and he becomes a decorated war hero. And after the war, like some of the Japanese Americans, he came back. He and his family tried to come back to the West Coast and reestablish themselves back in the city. And he eventually goes to college, and he becomes, wanting to help people, he becomes a private detective. And as I say, even though he was a soldier, he's very comfortable, I guess, in that arena. I wanted to make him not sort of that Sam Spade kind of character, and I say that he spends more time in the library than in seedy bars, and that's
which is great for this show because we're really looking at libraries tonight.
Yeah, it's apropos.
And then he meets lots of historic figures.
Mm-hmm.
So one is Dorothea Lange.
Dorothea Lange plays an important part in this story. And it actually, that element actually links to my own personal history with the city. But Dorothea Lange was actually teaching at what was then the California State Arts. I forget the exact acronym.
California Art Institute.
Yes.
Is that what it was
She
called
actually
then?
was recruited at the behest of Ansel Adams to join their photography department. And you might know, those of you who might not know Dorothea Lange by name, you do know her most famous picture, and it's sort of rendered here. Lisa drew that. It's an image of a migrant mother. The story of that, the term they used was Okies back then. These women, these families who were displaced in the Dust Bowl in the Heartland and came west. That woman who's like, she's not very old, she's like 32 years old, but just has this 1,000-yard stare. As she looks out there, she's holding these three children. It's this iconic image that once you've seen it, you'll never forget it. And I'm sure most people will remember that. And so Dorothea Lange was this photographer who was hired by the US government to document what they called the relocation of 120,000 Japanese Americans. So she shot extensively in San Francisco, all around California, Manzanar, and places like that. there. And so, yes, so she plays an important role in this actual story as well.
Yeah, she does. And we'll get maybe into that. There are some other historic figures that are kind of fun. I know Jack Kerouac and
Kerouac is
Cassidy play a role.
Neil Cassidy, Allen Ginsberg is there, Lawrence Ferlinghetti. And one of my favorite characters to write was lifted right out of the history of San Francisco, the literary history of that, was Shig Morrell, who was the longtime store manager of City Lights. Also a Japanese American, and in my story, I make him and Kat's best friends. They were young men; they're about the same age, and they were interned. Shig was actually at Minidoka in Idaho, and so that was where I set. Katz and his family were sent, and it was important because I could have just made them friends that met up after the war. They're both Japanese Americans; they would relate to each other certainly. But my father had these lifelong friends, these young men he met in camp, and they literally, it bonded them together in a way that, was kind of hard to describe. And so I knew that if, this friendship between Katz and Shig had to be cemented in this very traumatic, yet very important, event in their young lives.
In the book, Shig is the librarian at the internment camp.
He works in the library there. He also, his father was actually also a cook. So he actually helped his father. He literally did help his father in the kitchens, but he was also very proud of the fact he was always very much into books. And I guess that carries over years later when he becomes the store manager of City Lights.
Yeah. And another historic thing you allude to is that he is one of the people arrested for the reading of Howl by Allen Ginsberg.
That was important. In 1957, City Lights publishes Ginsberg's Howl, which is, again, they say that's the poem that created the whole beat movement. And Shig had the unfortunate distinction of being the poor guy who actually sold the copy of Howl to an undercover San Francisco police officer. And that sets up, he gets arrested on obscenity charges, which leads to Ferlinghetti being arrested, which leads to a whole federal trial about the artistic merits of whether or not that poem and that was actually obscene. And fortunately, free speech and the First Amendment won out, and they said no, this has redeeming value there. So he is culturally significant in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'm sure at the time he probably wasn't thrilled about being arrested, and yet it's like what a historic distinction.
In the book, I kind of make him, he wears it as a badge of honor, which I think that was probably in his character from what I've been able to glean from all the stuff I've read about him.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you do you have an excerpt that you'd like to read for us from your book?
Not really. I'd rather, I'd be happy to tell you some stories about it, but yeah, I don't really have an excerpt tonight.
I really enjoyed your book. The other thing I really want to ask you about, we mentioned Dorothea Lange, and there's a scene in the book that alludes to a real thing that happened with your father.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
So again, Dorothea was hired, retained by the government to document the relocation. So there's a photo she took in April of 1942 after Executive Order 9066 was posted. And this is my father on the worst day of his life. It's April there. This is on Van Ness Boulevard there. And he, along with my Japanese grandparents and his two sisters, were basically given about 2 weeks to sell everything they owned and report for relocation with 2 bags, basically only the stuff you could carry there. And my dad is 15 years old at the time. And I'm pretty sure this was the worst day of his life because these folks did not know what was going to happen there. They were temporarily moved to Tanforan, and eventually my father and my family end up in Topaz in Utah there. But yeah, this was the moment. And in the book, instead of Dorothea taking this photo of my father, she takes it of Katz, which leads to a conversation, which actually leads to them really becoming friends and having this connection years later when Katz goes to her for some help with something that he's working on there in 1958.
Yeah, I found it extremely, very powerful. moment in the book that really, takes this thing many of us know about, this historic relocation of, you said 120,000 people, but it makes it really, really personal. It makes you appreciate, how it would have, what the impact would have been on an individual.
Yeah. Worst
And
day
then
was
you went back there, and I'll show the picture.
we
You
found
in
that spot.
location.
Yeah, Lisa and I found that spot as well, and we kind of recreated that picture. And it's like, you probably see a little bit of the resemblance, but that's 80 years apart. But as I was standing there, I was very conscious of the fact that, the sidewalk and the looking uphill and the building stock hadn't changed that much. And, yes, the cars were, different than what was on the street, but that road was still there. And yeah, it's like, I tried to imagine what my father might've been seeing and, what he was thinking at that particular moment, and how 80 years later, his son would literally be standing right there, coming sort of full circle and really thinking about him in that context.
So the book is Hunter's Point, and it's your first of a series of detective novels that will be set in San Francisco.
Yeah, I ambitiously kind of put it out there that this was going to be a series, and it is. I was I loved writing these characters. I was very excited about that, and I'm about 90% through this, at least the first draft of the sequel. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have the second one out before the end of the year. So,
and you last time you were in town, which was that November?
November, yeah.
Yeah, you and I got together and we did some research.
Yes, thank you
for the
very
book.
much.
So tell us about, this is going up to where Sutro Tower is.
Yeah, Mount Sutro. It's like, how weird is it that you guys have like these forests in the middle of your city, and they sit really high up there, and they're oftentimes cloaked in fog. There, and it's just this really fascinating sort of place. And I was reading about it, and when I told you I was coming out, it says, hey, can we go to Mount Sutro? And you were very happy to take me up there. Thank you very much. And I learned some really interesting and kind of weird, quirky history about, sort of what was up there. Like the fact that there was a Nike missile command center up there in the 50s and 60s. And there's still like a slab of concrete where it used to be. And it connected with the actual missiles that were located down in the Presidio at that particular time. But yeah, that's kind of a fascinating little thing. It's like, we think about parks, Golden Gate Park is lovely, but you have this kind of wild forest, up there, and it sits so high up there. It gives you this different view and this sort of different perspective of the city there. And there's kind of an important sequence that is going to, that takes place up there in the second story.
And of course, it's not just a trail in a forest in the city. It's also the San Francisco Bay Ridge Trail.
There you go.
Yes, as in fact, if you go back to that map, Rodney, you can probably trace the sections from starting at the Stanyon Trail edge, which is San Francisco Rec and Parkland, and then it swoops on over and crosses a road at some point, and goes over to the Historic Trail a little bit farther. Nope, you got to go farther down. Historic Trail, which is UCSF land, and then loops all the way around and eventually takes you up onto Twin Peaks. That was actually a diversion for us. We were through the city streets, and then when they established all those trails, which are relatively recent in Sutro, we were able to divert our urban hike into a wild urban forest.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the very cool things about the Ridge Trail is that it's both very rural and urban. And there's tremendous views up there of the whole city. It's a really, like Peter, you and I were having a good time just like pointing at things and figuring out what is what from up there.
You can actually see that crane image that's on the cover of my book. You can see the crane from all the way up there, in the distance. I mean, to me, it's kind of iconic, there. Yep.
Yeah. Good views of Hunter's Point, Yosemite Slough. It's really beautiful. And then you and I are up on top of Twin Peaks here.
There you go. Yeah, it was a lovely day.
And these are the Nike missiles that were in the middle of our city.
Yes.
At one
point.
point.
Part of the air defense things. Those were anti-aircraft missiles that were there. There was also apparently a battery on Angel Island as well.
So speaking of cities, so this is not your first book. This is your first book of fiction,
Correct.
but you're kind of known as this love of city guys.
Yeah, I'm the city love guy. I've written 4 books about better placemaking, and I talk about love and emotional engagement with places and why it's a good thing for people to fall in love with their cities there. And so that's for about the last 12 years. That's been my sort of official job. I've been going around the country and around the world doing talks and workshops and working with people about finding ways to reconnect with their city and what we can do to enhance the relationship that we have with our places.
Well, I mean that's kind of what this show is all about is
Very much so.
The love of our geographic region, but of course the cities are very important parts of that. And we explore them on foot or on bicycle.
That's
So
key.
what are the best ways to love a city, Peter?
Well, you just said it, by foot, on bicycle. It's hard to connect with your city, with your environment when you're in your car. And I said this in my first book and in the revised edition of that, For the Love of Cities Revisited. The car acts as a prophylactic that keeps you from connecting with your city and with your community. So opportunities to walk and ride your bike or a one wheel or a skateboard or whatever it is that gets you out of the car and allows you to interact with your environment, you're going to see and you're going to experience the city in a different way. There. And so to me, it's oftentimes the little things, in addition to sort of parks and trails, which are great ways to see a different facet of your city. Sometimes it's the little thing that makes you smile. It's a beautiful mural. It's well done public art. It's a comfortable place to sit with a great view where you can actually look at, you could look at the bay or you could simply watch people. Never underestimate the power of just a good place to sit and people watch. Those are oftentimes the places that, we as human beings, we naturally gravitate to because we are social creatures. We're endlessly fascinated with watching each other. So if you want to make a better neighborhood, a better city, figure out ways for people to simply sit and watch each other, and they will intuitively feel more connected with their place.
Yeah, and when the places like the Bay Trail and the Ridge Trail are really full of that. They're connecting all these things. They have all these places to recreate, and they're doing exactly that. So
Absolutely.
with this background of as an urbanist, how does that help you write fiction? What do you think it did to kind of illuminate what you were trying to do?
I think my study of cities has helped me to understand sort of how they work there, and there's little technical elements. I talk about sort of the planning department at one point, and the legal side of some of this stuff. But for the most part, I think it allows me to just appreciate that the city is a character, or to me, if you're going to write about a place, you write about it as a character, and it's not simply the backdrop against which you have these people running around doing stuff. That it plays a part. It informs who they are, and hopefully there were ways that it becomes clear that folks actually do care about the place and their sense of community. Shig is one of these natural sort of connectors there in the North Beach community, and sort of that whole art scene that was happening, the whole beat renaissance that was happening there. And I tried to sort of illuminate sort of the role that he plays, even though he was not an artist. He was not a poet. He was not a writer, but he was one of those people that makes neighborhoods, that makes places better. And I talk a little bit about that in sort of the afterword and the end notes around that we take those folks kind of for granted, that these people who clearly love their community and they do amazing things for the rest of us. We just think that sort of happens, but no, yes, it does. But how can we maybe be more intentional about cultivating more of those kinds of people and enhancing that relationship that we have with our places?
So the city's a character in your book, and it will be a character in these future books.
Absolutely.
Because your plan, you've told me, is to continue setting these books at different time periods in San Francisco.
Yeah. Because, the first book here is taking place in 1958. The one I'm working on right now is going to be in 1959. And so then we're moving into the 60s. And, I heard a few interesting things happened in San Francisco in the 60s. So, I'd like to play against that really rich backdrop, there, and these characters I've created, and the characters that were real and actually there in the city doing some really wild and interesting things. Yeah, I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, well, I hope you will come on my Haight-Ashbury tour, and we can certainly dive into some of that history. It's
Well,
really
you
fun to
gave me,
talk
we
about.
did walk through the Haight and you showed me some interesting things. And it's like, there's definitely a couple elements that I know will be in a future book. It's like, you're kidding. That's across the street from that. It's like, okay, yeah, that's definitely going to work. So thank you.
Yeah,
for
we got to
that.
get Cats over to Hippie Hill.
Hippie Hill. There you go.
I think you'll enjoy it.
All right.
Well, Peter, you're connecting to us from the East Coast, so it's kind of late your time.
Yes, thank you again for having me on. I appreciate that. Again, Katz is a big fan of the libraries, and I know you guys are going to talk about the importance of libraries. They are, and from a city perspective, city libraries are some of the most egalitarian places, in our cities. And everyone talks about, sort of inclusive communities, inclusive development, and all that. Support your local libraries, because again, those are the things that resonate with us. And you may never even read a book, or borrow a book from the library, but the libraries of today are so much more than that, they're community hubs, and they are absolute, when done well, they are love notes for every community. So yay, libraries.
Yep. We have one question for you, and then we'll let you go. Gail's
Sure.
asking, do you consider this book historical fiction?
Yes, absolutely. Because a lot of the stuff that I write about actually happened. There was all kinds of, kind of nasty stuff that happened at the Hunters Point Naval Yard. And that is, I drew upon that. I might have embellished some of the story and some things. It's like, okay, let's go with that. So, but there very much was, there really was a government cover up of some of the stuff that was happening, there. And that's part of the story that was going on as well. Obviously, the beat poetry scene was real and was happening. And these characters like Ginsberg and Kerouac absolutely, happened. Whether or not they were in this particular bar on this particular night with Cats and some of these others, no, that's part of the story. But these folks were real. And I hope that San Francisco, if anybody remembers San Francisco at that time, I hope they'd say, yeah, that kind of felt real.
Well,
And
the
even if you
other
weren't
important
around
history
there-
in your book is that the characters at the end of the book go to a Giants Dodger game, and the Dodgers
Yes.
lose 8-0.
Yes, that was true. That was the opening day of the 1958 season not at Candlestick Park, which was not built yet, but it was actually at Seals Stadium there in the city. And the Dodgers and the Giants both relocated from New York to the West Coast and played their inaugural West Coast seasons in 1958. And the opening day was the two of those going at it, your hated rivals there. And yes, the Giants did beat the Dodgers 8-0.
So, yep, beat LA always. Well, thank you, Peter. And, a lot of people out there are saying they're looking forward to your book. Maybe we'll have you back.
Love
When
that.
we have the next
You
book.
can order it obviously through Amazon, but if you want to support your local neighborhood and your local bookstore, ask them to order the book there. They can order it through their distributor as well. That actually helps a lot of things there. But if you want the ebook, Amazon is the way to go.
And yeah, and I'm gonna put a request into the local libraries to get them to order it too.
Well, maybe Anita can help with that too.
So thank you, Peter. Also want to say thank you to your wife, Lisa, for her wonderful drawings.
Yes, thank you very much. She's listening over here. So,
And we hope to see you out here again sometime in the not too distant future.
you absolutely will. Future books beckon. So,
Okay.
thanks, guys.
Well, have a good night.
I'm going to sign off. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. So now I am joined by Anita Shinall of the San Francisco Public Library, and
Hello.
at the Park Branch, which we're seeing here in the background. This is a fairly typical patron of the Park Branch, isn't it?
It seems pretty typical to me. Yes.
And I'm going to go through a couple things before we jump into our questions, Anita.
Sure.
I happen to really love the Park Branch because that's where my Haight-Ashbury walking tour starts from. But there's a way to go and see all the branches, all 28 branches of the San Francisco Public Library. There's this thing called the Explorer map, which every branch has. They'll give you this map, and then you get stickers for all the different branches. So here's mine, and it won't look that impressive. I think I have like 6 or 7 stickers because I actually had a lot more stickers and I lost my map. So get the map, don't lose the map. So I had to start over again, but that's okay because I actually really do want to go back and visit all these branches. And this is what it will look like when it's completed. So basically the little circles are kind of grayish with a a diagram inside. And then when you get the stickers, they'll be colorful. And all of the designs you see in the stickers are something you'll find at the library. So here's the Noe Valley Library, and it's got these little snails on the outside of the library, and that's what they've chosen for their sticker. So I think, we often talk about circumnavigating the Ridge Trail or circumnavigating the Bay Trail, but I think there's something to be said for going to all of the branch libraries. It's a great way to learn all the neighborhoods of San Francisco. And Anita, you've worked as a librarian in every single branch in the San Francisco Public Library system.
This is true.
How long did it take for you to do that?
It took me, oh my gosh, it actually took me 5 years.
5 years. I'm not surprised.
There was one branch that was my holdout, and I finally got to work at that branch after the pandemic. But I did every single other branch before the pandemic, and Ingleside was my holdout, and I didn't get to that until relatively recently. So, well,
it's quite an accomplishment. And the other thing I want to push, is library cards. So we already, I guess we're kind of preaching to the converted here. Everybody has a library card. Good for you. I have a bunch of library cards. I have 19. I think I mentioned that at the top of this show. Basically, if you're in California, anybody who's a California resident can get a library card from just about every library system. I think I've run into one or two that don't do that, but most of them do that. And this one is actually the Los Angeles Library. So even though I say nasty things about the Dodgers, I nevertheless have one of their library's cards, and I love borrowing ebooks from their library. And here's all the things you can, everyone thinks of, okay, you can borrow a book with a library card, but there's a lot more that you can do. You can, use ebooks through the Libby app. That means you don't even have to go to the library to get the book or to return it. Canopy is streaming films and TV, including some that you will not find on Amazon or Netflix or other commercial streaming systems. And it's totally free, like everything at the library. You can get 20 free copies a day at the library. So if you need to print something, if you don't ever, even if you do have a printer and you want to save a little money, you can go print at the library. It's totally cool. There's free museum passes, and I put the asterisk here saying it's for San Francisco residents only, but your local library, say I live in the East Bay, I live in Contra Costa County. Contra Costa County also has this Discover and Go. They do check your zip code. They don't want people like me with the multiple library cards getting multiple museum passes that way. That seems like a little unfair to the museums. But I know SF MoMA is an example of a museum that offers these, and I think the Asian Art Museum and Exploratorium, a bunch of them.
California Academy of Sciences is one.
Yeah, so lots of great lots of great museums. There's all kinds of cool databases. The one I've fixated on, I've done shows about it, is the Sanborn insurance maps, which basically show you what the cityscape was like over the last 100 years. Really cool. Online classes such as language classes are available. And then there's laptop borrowing, which we'll talk a little more about. But some of the branches, not all, have laptop borrowing kiosks, which is pretty cool. And then, Anita, you just told me yesterday, I didn't even know about this. There's a San Francisco Public Library app, which allows you to borrow books without actually having your physical library card. You can, it'll have a kind of version of your library card in the app, and you can just scan that, get your book. You can view your library record. You can renew things. It's really, really cool. I've noticed that some, but not all of the Bay Area library systems have this. And it seems like maybe more will be adding it. And then these are services you'll find at pretty much all the branches. You'll find, for example, bathrooms and drinking fountains. We talk about that a lot in this show, how important they are and how sometimes you really don't know where you can find them. Well, you can always find them at a library. Scanning, there's really cool scanners. I'll show you an image of that in a second. Of course, Wi-Fi. And Anita, you gave me the Wi-Fi for the Park branch, but pretty much all the branches have very good Wi-Fi. Some of them it's like well over 100 megabits per second. So fast. You could do a Zoom program from a library, you would want to find a private room to do that from, and not all the libraries have that. But you have great connectivity, and of course, electricity for charging your devices.
Yes.
And here's the scanner. You can scan to an email or a zip drive, or what do you call it? A
Yeah.
USB drive.
USB drive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Flash drive.
So let all the ways you would want to scan, it lets you scan. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the park branch,
Indeed.
because that's the very best branch of the public libraries, the San Francisco public library system. Well, I guess
pretty
that's a
biased, but
subjective thing, right?
Mhm.
It is the longest operating branch, and we'll talk about that a little more later. But yeah, 1909, it was it's actually branch number 5, but all the 1, 2, 3, and 4 are long gone. So it's the only
Or
surviving.
moved. Totally different buildings, and their buildings are newer than ours. Ours is the oldest.
And then, let me ask you, I got this thing, Haight-Ashbury Archives. Anita, tell us, what are the Haight-Ashbury Archives?
It is a special library use only collection that documents the history of the neighborhood in the 1960s specifically. It also touches on music, counterculture, and all kinds of different artifacts and fiction and nonfiction books regarding Haight-Ashbury in the 60s.
Yeah, and then so you let me peruse it, and I found the Oracle. It's a facsimile of the Oracle newspaper, which I think was like 1960. It's like 66 to 68, and very, very cool stuff. This is Ken Kesey without a shirt on and with a microphone. God knows what he's saying.
Yeah.
Here's an ad for Big Brother and the Holding Company playing at the Avalon. So just like really cool history there. What are some of the other things, Anita? And I'm actually going to ask you this, Marie, too, since this is your local branch, but I'll start with you, Anita. What are some of the other things that you think makes the park branch special?
Well, we try to provide a wonderful place for the people in our neighborhood to come and enjoy and find information. And that is both the people that live there and also the people that visit there. So all are welcome. All of the things that happen at our library are free of charge. And we have a nice sized book collection. We're a small branch, so it's not the hugest collection, but we have books, we have DVDs and Blu-rays, we have magazines, we have newspapers, and we have a really nice selection of vinyl records that there's a few branches, and ours is one of them, that circulate really nice vinyl records and that have been very popular. And we also do programs for the community. I do story times for children on a regular basis. We have a monthly open mic poetry and music in that very room that is on your slide right there.
The Monkey Butts. One of their favorite places to perform.
Yeah.
And then I've actually presented there in the very space where the Monkey Butts are in this picture. I did my Summer of Love music programs on the Jefferson Airplane, the Grateful Dead, Bill Graham. Marie, you're just like, this is your local branch. What do you love about it?
Well, I have 2 now grown young adult children, but participated in the story time many times over the years. I vote in the basement where the Monkey Butts were residing. I've been to a lot of Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Coalition meetings there. It really is just generally the hub for who we are, and it really is and has always been embracing of the Haight culture. And so there's beautiful artwork on the walls. They had a recent renovation, and so you can go in and really feel a little bit of the history and just the current liveliness of what is the neighborhood.
Yeah, I know they have one of the signs from the free clinic telling you that you're not really supposed to be taking drugs at the free clinic, and probably not the library either, actually, when you get right down. So yeah, it's a really special place to visit. And of course, again, like if you go get this Discover map, it'll be just one of many branches that you visit. And you'll get a sense of like what makes each branch kind of special, how they fit into their neighborhood. As a librarian, Anita, when you go into a branch, like what are some of the things you notice about a branch?
When I visit, the overall ambiance is definitely very important. I like to look and see what kind of places there are to sit, if there are any views, if I love to peruse the new books section and see what's being highlighted. And we regularly do displays on top of our shelves to highlight different facets of the collection for different times of year. So around the holidays, we might have books regarding the holidays. For Black History Month, we would have a lot of books about Black history, different kinds of topical and interesting displays. And so I love to see what each specific library feels is important and puts out for people to see. So those are some of the things that I look for.
Yeah, I've gone and I've actually visited 25 different libraries over the past couple of weeks getting ready for this show. These are the ones I went to libraries all over the Bay Area, but these are the branches I visited in San Francisco. And I told you, so you already know the answer to this, but I wonder if anybody in chat wants to guess of these, which was the quietest? See if anybody wants to throw that in the chat. And I don't know what it means to be the quietest. I don't think it's necessarily the best thing that you're the quietest branch or but it's kind of, I was really struck. I'm not seeing any guesses out there. Chinatown. I went into Chinatown one evening. Someone guessed West Portal. West Portal was pretty lively, but I went on a weekend. So maybe that's not even a fair question. But I was just struck at like, wow, like in Chinatown, I went and asked the librarian in a very, very low voice, is it always this quiet? The only library that was quieter was the Bancroft Library on UC Berkeley campus, which has big signs saying, you do not talk in this library. It's strictly quiet there. But actually, I think it's kind of nice that there is actually talking in a lot of these libraries, that it's perfectly fine to have a conversation. You want to keep a low inside voice, but it's not like the super quiet place that maybe people thought it was traditionally.
Some people are a little upset about that, and I have to, just let them know that the library is for everybody and that we cannot guarantee complete quiet. I certainly try to minimize any disturbances, but a lot of times children come into the library and have a very hard time keeping quiet. But some of our adult patrons also can be lively at times. We strive to be a comfortable place for everybody, and I'm not sure that it's super comfortable to feel like you can't speak. So I definitely encourage people to speak in a quiet voice.
To me, the Park Branch is definitely not a super quiet library, but it's very convivial. I think I always feel really comfortable in there. We have a nice quote from Joe in chat. He says, "I lived in the Haight from 1973 to 1994 and used the branch a lot and was always treated very well. The threat to close it some years ago was terrible, and I'm glad it got rehabbed instead in the wonderful community room it has in its basement." Yep, it's nicely renovated. Here's me doing my little excursion to many different libraries, and I decided, this is totally random and arbitrary, I would just count the number of books on the shelf from several of my favorite authors. So I chose Ann Tyler, Philip Roth, and John Updike, and Zora Neale Hurston. And just drum roll, anyone want to guess whose book was found the most frequently? And again, I have no idea what this means, because it could mean here's Philip Roth. He's number one with 200 books I found in my excursions, but it could be that it means, well, people aren't borrowing Philip Roth's book. Maybe it's a bad thing that there's so many of his books on the shelf. Followed by Ann Tyler. Ann Tyler, it seems like she has the most libraries where she is the leader in the number of books. Philip Roth kind of made up for that with the really big libraries like UC Berkeley, and the main libraries seem to have more of his book. But you go to the branches, Ann Tyler, you see a lot more of her. John Updike fairly far behind. And then I think I owe Zora Neale Hurston an apology, because it could just be that it was Black History Month, so a lot of people were borrowing her books, or maybe they were put in special places where I wasn't finding them, because that does seem like she's underrepresented, but she's of course a great writer also. So that was a fun thing to do, and just really fun to like check out. The branches are all so different. Noe Valley, Anita, you and I were talking about this. Noe Valley is one of how many, like 7 Carnegie libraries?
7 Carnegie libraries are in the SFPL system.
Yeah, and it has a really beautiful ceiling. I think that's it. But if I'm wrong, don't hold it against me. It's a beautiful ceiling somewhere.
Mhm.
North Beach has one of the new libraries, and or renovated. Actually, no, I think it is new,
It's
right?
brand new. It
'Cause it
is.
got moved.
Yeah, it is brand spanking new.
Yeah, really enjoyed that. Potrero Hills branch has just this awesome view, and it has a bunch of chairs lined up right next to the window, so you can be like reading your book and looking out at this killer view of San Francisco. So you don't need to spend several $1,000,000 to have a place with a view. You can just go to the library, save yourself several $1,000,000. This is the San Francisco History Room. I couldn't find a good picture of it, but it is a really cool place to visit, just full of amazing materials, including the actual physical Sanborn fire insurance maps, which you guys all know I'm obsessed with. But many other things, and the librarians in there are super knowledgeable. Anita, did you get a chance to work in the history room?
No, I have not worked in the history room, but I have visited it before.
Yeah, maybe that's something like you have to be at the library for a long time or something.
Yeah.
They really know their stuff. Here's another view, I think, of the North Beach Library.
Yes. Children's room at North Beach.
This is San Mateo. San Mateo had this like cool little bicycle book stand at their library. Also with these Chinese things for the new year. So that's cool. Walnut Creek had a brand new library that was fun to visit. This is Rockridge. Rockridge is a really impressive Oakland library, not too far from the BART station. Here's some historic picture. Do you guys have typewriters anymore?
No.
No, it's a little hard to maintain. It's too bad. I bet you
We
there's a
have lots
library
of
somewhere that has
computers,
typewriters.
keyboards, but no typewriters.
I bet you there's a library. Actually, here a story. At the Los Angeles Library, they always have amazing they have a museum basically at the top floor with different exhibitions. And one time we went there, and it was an exhibition of Tom Hanks's typewriter collection. And he had like 20 vintage typewriters, and he had written something on each one about the typewriter.
That's cool.
And here's another thing I didn't know until doing this excursion to these libraries. Tom Hanks is now is a short story writer. He's got a collection of short stories out there. Interesting, dude. This is a model of the Berkeley Library, most of which is underground, which is kind of interesting. So let's talk about borrowing the laptops, Anita.
Yes.
So Park is one of not all the branches have this, but it's one of the branches that does.
Yeah, I think at least half of our branches have them, and certainly I think the Maine has them as well. So these are laptops that are for library use only, but it allows you the flexibility to check it out and find a comfortable space in the library for you to do your processing, your word processing or browsing of the internet. And all of our library cards come with up to 2 hours a day of computer use on either the laptops or on our desktop computers.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. And it's kind of nice that people that don't, maybe are not that well off can get a laptop and go and do their stuff on a laptop and find like a nice private nook or something to do it.
I love to see when students come in. A lot of elementary and high school students will come in and they'll print out their homework to take to school, and I love to see that.
Here's something I
Closing the
found.
digital divide is a good thing.
There's a whole bunch of libraries that have seed lending libraries. This one's in Richmond, city of Richmond, but I know there's a bunch of, you told me Portola.
There's two, yeah.
And,
Portola
Potrero.
and Potrero, actually.
Yeah, so that's something to look for. And then I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse, but I was really thrilled to find libraries that have bike link lockers outside. I thought that was really cool. If you have an e-car, some of them have e-card chargers. I don't think San Francisco public libraries tend to have that because you guys don't really have that kind of space.
Not really, no. Not that I know of.
Oh, and then
Not
here's my last thing. I got to visit a library that's under construction in a place called Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. And this is a friend of mine. Her name's Barbara Forney. Her family is supporting this. And here I am in a hard hat visiting this library. And this is what it's going to look like when it's completed. And it's going to have a really, really great auditorium. And I've already talked to them about, it's going to open in June, about at some point down the line doing Summer of Love music presentations there. And I'm also talking to the San Francisco Public Library about that. And I just talked today with your friend Alberto, Anita, and that is in the works for this summer. I'll be doing some of my Summer of Love music programs live and in person at hopefully the Park branch and maybe a couple other branches of
Yeah,
the San Francisco
we're
Public
looking
Library.
forward to it.
So Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, all that's coming. Here are my library takeaways. Get a library card. I guess you already do. Get a bunch of library cards. Get that Explorer map. And stay tuned. If you get the Explorer map, I have this idea in my head that maybe we'll have some kind of Bay Area Trails Confidential day where we all go by bike and on foot to a whole bunch of libraries and get those stickers. I think visiting libraries is a really, really great thing. And I am proud to call myself a library tourist.
That's fabulous.
So now we get to our contest, and the contest is going to actually involve a library related topic. Serena Seaton she has provided the Bay Trail map cards, and she always gets to pick a favorite place. She picked a Ridge Trail place, Marie. Hope you're happy about this. The section of the Ridge Trail from Tilden to Redwood Regional Park, kind of along Skyline in the East Bay. She said, get out there, visit that. So you can win either the Bay Area Ridge Trail Guide or the Bay Trail map cards. But you're going to need to use chat for this one. So it's going to be, we told you that the Park branch is the oldest branch in the San Francisco Public Library system. Whoever is the first person in chat to tell me what the second oldest branch is, the second longest operating branch in the San Francisco Public Library system, will win a set of Bay Trail cards or the Ridge Trail Guide. Catherine just nailed it. Wow. Catherine, okay. Catherine, you can privately send me your, so Catherine says mission, and she's totally right. And in fact, I think I have it. So the park was 1909, mission is 1915. See, you have them beat by like 6 years. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, just that building, but they were the first branch as well.
It's almost you could almost take it away from Catherine, but we're not going to do it because it's actually not operating. It's temporarily closed, but we're not going to hold it against it.
There's a temporary site though.
There is
the mission
in a
librarians
yoga
are there
studio.
giving out books.
Yes. Noe Valley is the third oldest. Golden Gate Valley, which is beautiful. It's one of the Carnegie. It might be the most beautiful branch. Really incredible interior. That's from 1917. And then some people might have thought of the old main library, which is now the Asian Art Museum. That's also from 1917. Of course, it's not operating as a library, so it doesn't really count. Anita, anything else we should know about libraries before we wrap?
Well, in the chat, somebody was talking about the California State Library Parks Pass. And I did want to highlight that because for all of you who love to go and visit parks and walk on trails, this is a wonderful resource. And it's not just at our library at SFPL, it's all throughout California. So any library near you that you have a card for, you can go and check these out. And they are good for the parking at over 200 different parks throughout California. There are a number of parks that are not, that are excluded, like say San Simeon, like Hearst Castle. You can't use it at Hearst Castle for parking at Hearst Castle. There are a few notable exclusions. And in San Francisco, there actually aren't very many in San Francisco or any.
Candlestick, but I guess you don't have to pay to park there.
You know, last time I asked about Candlestick, they said yes, you can use it at Candlestick, but they weren't charging for parking right then. So it's not really. I tell the people who come to us in San Francisco, you really want to use this outside of San Francisco, but there are places all up and down the coast and all throughout the state that you can use them at.
And I had no idea about that, Anita. And it just shows, if you ask a librarian, hey, do you have anything else we should know about? They'll always have something interesting to say. Because librarians are like the protectors of our knowledge, right? And I will just add another personal note.
Giving people things that they love to use and enjoy. So
yeah, my mother was a librarian, so it's a topic very dear to my heart. And I love libraries. And Anita, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about Park Branch and the San Francisco Public Library System. Stick around. We'll see if we've got questions. Oh, here are the newest branches, by the way. Kind of cool. Bayview and Visitation Valley, both very worth visiting. And our next show is going to be on the first Wednesday again. We did this temporarily because of some travel plans I had, but we're going to go back to the first Wednesday, which means I have 3 weeks to put a show together. But I promise you, it's going to be great. Marie, I'm glad to see you with the thumbs up. I'm going to be giving you a call. Probably be some good Ridge Trail stuff on this next show. But we will wrap with our music by Jason Myers. Singing Happy Trails. You guys are all hearing the music, right?
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Who cares about the clouds if we're together? Just sing a song and bring the sunny weather. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Until we meet again.
All right. And I have enabled you guys to unmute. I do want a couple thank yous. Anita, thank you very much for joining us. Peter Kageyama, loved hearing about his book. My wife, Sarah, is always very helpful with this. Jason was the one who was singing that. He's a really good guy. We've got show notes, and I haven't really fleshed this out too much, but I'll work on that in the days ahead. And there will be the recording of this will be there too at that location. I'll send you guys an evaluation email tomorrow with a survey, and that will have the link to this. But now, if anyone, I saw a couple of questions that I'll read from the chat, but you guys are able to unmute. If you want to raise your hand, I'll call on you, or, we aren't a gigantic group, so you can probably just unmute. But first I'll ask Anita, Gail wants to know if you take donations of vinyl records.
So we don't take donations to use in the library. All of our vinyl collections are brand new heavy duty vinyl. But the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library will accept those kind of donations. They sell them in book and media sales, and all of the proceeds of the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library go to all of the amazing programs that we do. So you can make an appointment at the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library's donation center on 17th Street, and they would be happy to take them off your hands.
Okay, that's good. And Sandy noted that there's a 99% Invisible podcast about the San Francisco Library. I love that podcast. Definitely recommend that. You know,
I'm
the guy who
definitely
does
going to
it-
check that out. Thank you for the recommendation.
It's the Roman Mars is the host of that, and he lives in El Cerrito, actually. And let's see. Oh, Anita, I wanted to ask you. Oh, I thought I had another question for you. It'll come to me. Right now, does anybody want to unmute and either ask a question or make a statement? You guys are, I believe you're able to do that now. And if you want to put it in the chat, I'd be happy to read yourself. So the podcast is called 99% Invisible. 99, you know, the number's 99% Invisible. It's ostensibly a podcast about design, but really it's about how design is everywhere, and that it's 99% invisible. We don't usually see it. If something's really well designed, you don't even think about it. And the library is a great example of that. Oh, I know, Anita, you recommended to me the library book by Susan Orleans.
Yes.
And that's a great book about libraries.
Yeah, it makes me, I really enjoyed that book, and I very much want to go visit this LA Central Library now because of it.
I just went there like 4 or 5 months ago, and they had a wonderful architecture tour of the library. And then I was, you know, the thing about that library is there was a horrible fire that like destroyed a large part of their collection. But so they were able to save a fair number of books too. And I went and asked, can I see a book that like survived the fire? And they can show you books that have these little stains in them that are from the water from the hoses. They had to freeze all the books to keep them from getting moldy. Just really fascinating. Other stuff out there, other questions or comments?
Can I add something? This is
Please.
Sandy.
Go ahead, Sandy.
And so I was the one who mentioned 99% Invisible, and both that podcast, that episode about the San Francisco Library and the Susan Orlean book. In both books, both of them, librarians are heroes. You know, what they do is wonderful.
Couldn't agree with you more, Sandy.
Thank you.
You know, and it kind of relates to the goal of this show is to highlight public space, public things that we own together, and think about how important they are, how important they were to get us through the pandemic, and how they bring us together as a community. And libraries are one of the oldest examples of that. You know, libraries and parks are something that go way back. And it's a very interesting part of like San Francisco history to find out like, okay, when did we have our first library? You know, late 19th century. And, you know, like, and that's part of the story that Susan Orleans tells in that book is like the history of the LA library, which is really fascinating. And sometimes some pretty unfair things happen to some of the people involved. Some of the heroic people were not treated as well as they should have and all that. Not seeing a whole lot of other questions or comments, so we can wrap this up. Oh, do you know the story about the recreation of the San Francisco Library after the earthquake? No, Joe, I don't think I do. Do you know that,
I don't
Anita?
know that story either. No.
Because the main library that became the Asian Art Museum was built after the earthquake and fire in like, I think 1917. which is pretty long time after the earthquake and fire. You know, so maybe there were more temporary things. Probably you could go to the Sanborn fire maps. You could find where the other libraries were.
I know that originally the main library was part of City Hall. And I do think that it did get damaged in the fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the whole city hall got destroyed. Joe, you go ahead.
Well, I didn't know the architecture story, but the book story, since I'm a historian, I'm interested in the books. And the book story is that the collection was largely destroyed in the fire and in the earthquake and the fire and the fighting of the fire afterwards. And that there was a major campaign all around the country, sort of started spontaneously by people who wanted to contribute something, but they had no idea what was most useful. But a whole lot of people decided, well, no matter what happens, they got to rebuild their library. And so huge, the whole library collection post 1908, the core of it was these donated books from all over the country, all over the world. And it was quite a substantial, respectable library before they had the money to buy more. And a side note to that is I also lived in Chicago, and after the Great Chicago Fire, in the late 1800s, forget what year it was, people did the same thing, only they didn't realize that Chicago was such a brutal, uber capitalist place that they hadn't had a library before the Great Chicago Fire. There had been no public library. And so the very origins of the Chicago Public Library, which now, of course, has a wonderful building which people should visit, named for Harold Washington.
Yep.
You see it from the L. It's got its own L stop, and it's a great place. But its origins literally was people giving books to replace a non-existent library.
Huh, that's interesting. Yeah, I went to the Harold Washington Library this past summer. I totally agree. It's really, really well designed. Lots of really cool spaces just to like sit and work.
Unfortunately, as you mentioned earlier about the history of the San Francisco Library, some of the management practices have not been terribly wonderful, and which is one of the reasons why the library workers have organized a union and have had to fight for their own conditions, which of course are the same. Their conditions are the conditions of patronage as well, right? And that's another heroic story that could be told at some point.
Yep. Well, I just want to say I really, really appreciate all the people that work in the library. And I think, if you just go into a library, you go into any library and you say, what's the highlight of this library? What do you guys have that you think is interesting? You will always get a good answer. You will not get like, oh yeah, this is just a bunch of miscellaneous books. I went into a library in the middle of maybe Kansas, very, very small town. And they had things to say about their library. It wasn't very big, but it was still interesting. So cool. And then Gail puts in chat that there's a Carnegie Library in San Rafael. I think I went to that library. I went to the San Rafael Library. Has made me wonder what today's millionaires will do to make such a difference for future generations to come. It's sort of mind-blowing. Yeah, it is, because that is what the library is it's like the past generations are talking to us through all this knowledge. Oh, and I didn't really ask you, Anita, is it okay that I have all these library cards?
Absolutely.
Yes.
There's no reason why you shouldn't, as long as you're following the rules of the particular library systems. But everybody who gets a library card is supporting that library, is a statistic saying, look here, this is why it's important for us to be around, because we have these users. So
Yeah.
we welcome people coming and getting cards. It is their right to be loved.
It can be advantageous. Like if you can borrow ebooks, And if the ebook you borrow, you only get them for 3 weeks. But if the book if you think you're going to need more than 3 weeks, you could always put it on hold at another library and then read the San Francisco library copy for 3 weeks and then grab the Los Angeles library copy.
Yeah, they are different collections in a lot of cases. So I can see that it would be advantageous to have more than one. I have to admit, SFPL allows you to take out 30 ebooks at a time. You get 10 views on Canopy. You get 30 Hoopla ebooks or audiobooks or videos, all of the different things that Hoopla has. I've never found the need to go anywhere else, but that doesn't mean that if somebody has greater needs than mine, that they shouldn't. So
you might be a faster reader than me. And the other thing is the LA library collection is vast. So if it's like a popular new book, they'll buy more of the ebook copies. So you may not have to wait as long on hold. That's what I find. But it's all good. I'm glad that the library thinks what I'm doing is okay. I wouldn't do it if they didn't think it was okay.
No, it's perfectly fine.
Want to be supportive of our libraries. So Anita, it's been so great working with you on this. I hope we can do another library show down the road. And maybe I'm going to work on this idea of maybe getting a bunch of us together to go and get stickers together. So we can get our Discover map going. And I definitely intend to complete my Discover map this year for sure.
That sounds great. Let me know when it is. And if I'm free, I will definitely join.
Oh, and I think we will start at the park branch. So
that would be great.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, I'm going to say good night. Great having everybody, and see you on March 1st, the very first Wednesday in March at 7:30 p.m. Another great Bay Area Trails Confidential show. Good night.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, viewers. Good night.